Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Historic Preservation Exterior Rehabilitation Virtual Grant Workshop for 2024. My name is Kevin Waite, and I am Principal Planner with the city's Historic Preservation Office. I've got three colleagues here with me tonight, and we'll go ahead and have them introduce themselves as well. We'll start with Helena, then Desiree, and then Mara.
Hi, I'm Helena Reuter. I'm the Historic Preservation Officer for the city.
Hi, good evening. Desiree Aranda. I'm Preservation Planner with the office.
Hi, Maura Jackson, also Preservation Planner with the office.
Thank you. And Helena is going to kick us off with just a short introduction, and then we'll get right into the meat of the presentation.
All right, well, thanks so much for coming and attending. We're very excited. The City Council had restored $200,000 in funding for exterior rehabilitation grant program back in 2021 and has continued to set aside general fund monies for that purpose. And this year we also have the Historic Preservation Bond Fund program coming back. So we're excited to also include an additional $100,000 from the bond fund towards this year's exterior rehabilitation grant round. So that in this year we'll have a $300,000 total pot of funds. So very excited about that, and excited that you are here with us this evening. And as we get going, I know there's going to be a lot of good information available that will also be recorded and put on the website if for some reason you have to depart in advance of getting to the ending. And just as a note, if you have questions along the way, you can put them in the Q&A. And then when we get to the end of the presentation, we will read through the questions and provide answers. So thanks again, everyone, for attending.
Thank you, Helena. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen right now and start our presentation. So again, welcome everyone to the Exterior Rehabilitation Virtual Grant Workshop. We are excited to have you here. As Helena mentioned, we are recording this. This will be posted on the city's website and be available later. So if you need to refer back to it for any reason, or you have to leave early or have friends who couldn't attend, please let them know that this recording will be available. For tonight's agenda, there's basically 5 things we're going to cover. We've already done the welcome and introduction. Thank you, Helena, for that. And so we're on to item number 2 already, which is a review of the application packet. And we are going to spend quite a bit of time on this, probably about 40 minutes or so, just going through both the program guide and the application packet, so you have a clear understanding of how the program works and what the application consists of. I will mention, if you attended this workshop last year, this is going to look very familiar. We haven't changed too much for this year, although there are a few fairly important points that have changed. So we want to make sure that you're aware of that. But the overall format of our workshop is very similar. The third thing we're going to hit is key dates. We're going to kind of make sure that you understand what the deadlines are, and if your grant is approved, how that approval process works and the time frame involved. And then number 4 are just some final points to consider, things we want to leave you with that make sure you're aware of as you prepare your application and submit it. And then finally, we've got questions and answers at the end. We've got a few kind of frequently asked questions we're going to go through, but as Helena mentioned, we do want you to be able to participate and enter any questions that you have into the Q&A, and we will do our best to answer them at the end. So we're going to start with the application packet. And the packet consists of 6 different documents. These are all currently available on the city's website at the address at the bottom here, Phoenix.gov/PDD/historic-preservation. And when you go on that website, you will see a link to financial incentives. And then from there, you'll see another link to the exterior rehab program. That's where you'll find all of these documents. So again, six documents here that make up the entire packet. The program guide, which talks about how the program works. The second is the actual application that you will submit and turn in. And then the third is a sample application. We just provided as a courtesy to kind of give you an idea of what we're looking for. You know, when you fill out the application, gives you something to work from as an example. And then 4, 5, and 6 are sample legal agreements. The program agreement is the actual contract that you will sign with the city for the grant. The deed of conservation easement is the document that will get recorded with the property in conjunction with the grant. And then number 6 is a consent agreement. If you have a mortgage on the property or there's a lien holder, we do need them to consent to you receiving the grant funds and the city recording the easement. I'm not going to get into documents 3 through 6 in any detail tonight, but we just want to make you aware of them. Please be sure to read through them and become familiar with them before you submit your application, just so there are no surprises later. But what I'm going to do is turn to the program guide first. So I am going to pull that up on my screen here. And I'm going to zoom in to a scale where this is a little easier to read. I'm going to kind of skip through the cover sheet here, as well as the table of contents, and just go right to page 3, which is kind of the most important part where the body of the document begins. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the background here, but just know this program has been around since 1990, going back to a bond election that took place in 1989, where Phoenix voters approved $15 million in general obligation bond funds for historic preservation. It was renewed again in 2001 with a bond election that took place that year, and then again in 2006. Following the 2006 bond, the money kind of disappeared for a while. Fortunately, the city council decided to bring it back using general fund money. And so we have had that available now for the last 4 years. The council has allocated $200,000 each year from the general fund. And as Helena mentioned at the outset, we had another bond election in November of last year, where voters approved another $5 million for historic preservation. So we have a portion of that money that will be available for the exterior rehab program again as well. So it's a good year to apply for a grant. We have more money available than we've had in years past. So definitely take advantage if you can. Turning now to the program summary. The purpose of the program is to provide exterior rehabilitation assistance and to encourage reinvestment and revitalization in any inner city historic neighborhoods. The program makes money available to private property owners who are doing work on the exteriors of their historic homes. And any property that is in a designated historic district or individually listed on the Phoenix Historic Register may apply. There are some exceptions to that, so I'll get into that in just a moment, but it really is intended for listed historic properties. The program reimburses owners on a 50-50 matching basis for pre-approved work. The minimum amount that you can apply for is $5,000, and the maximum that the city can provide is $20,000. I will say last year we had 2 applications that asked for less than $5,000 and we had to reject them, unfortunately. So make sure you're not asking for too little. Unfortunately, if your project does come in at over 20,000, we will have to cap it at 20,000. In exchange for receiving the grant funds, the property owner agrees to sell the city a conservation easement to help protect the historic character of the property. And we'll get into that in a little bit more detail later on. But, you know, I'm not going to go through the rest of this in a lot of detail, but just know we're trying to preserve historic buildings, revitalize historic buildings, and we want your project to preserve your historic home as much as possible. So that's the idea. I'm going to move on now to page 4 here. We do have hyperlinks in the PDF that you can click on and read the general design guidelines for historic properties. You can find out if your property or neighborhood is on the Phoenix Historic Register. We have a number of other technical documents too that may be helpful, so please take full advantage of those. Again, to be eligible for the program, so the property does need to be on the Phoenix Historic Property Register, listed either individually or within a listed historic district. And the property does have to be a contributing property to the district. And so you might ask, what's the difference between contributing and non-contributing? Contributing properties are ones that are from the historic time period and have not been heavily modified. So the majority of homes in the district are going to be considered contributors, but you will have some that were either built much later. Let's say they were built within the last 20, 30, maybe even 40 years. Those would be late enough. They would not be considered contributors because of their age. It's also possible the home may have been heavily modified and no longer is recognizable as an historic home. And in that case, it would be a non-contributor as well and would not be eligible for the grant program. Now, I will say that if you have a non-contributor that's been modified and the work that you're proposing will bring it back to contributing status, that project is eligible for the grant program and would strongly encourage you to submit under that scenario. So let's say you've got a house where the front porch has been completely enclosed, and because of that, the property has been deemed non-contributing to your historic district. Check with us and see, hey, you know what, if I were to reopen this porch, could my house become a contributor again? And would this work qualify under the grant program? Chances are we'll say yes and yes. And we would encourage you to go ahead and submit an application in that scenario. And then your non-contributing house could potentially become a contributor. And so those are the types of grant projects, honestly, we love the most, because it takes a home that really doesn't contribute to the historic district and turns it into one that does. We should mention too, to be considered for funding, applicants must own the property to be rehabilitated, or you have to have some legal authorization from the owner allowing you to apply for funding, along with evidence of the owner's willingness to execute all the legal agreements. So you may have someone that says, hey, can you fill out this application for me? That's cool. I get it. You know, sometimes people need help filling out an application. We certainly, encourage that, but the owner of the property will be the one that needs to sign the actual contract, the program agreement. They will need to sign the deed of conservation easement. There's really no getting around that. So we do need the owner to eventually sign. You may be interested in buying a property and maybe you're an escrow or you're not quite even there yet. You want to submit an application, that's okay, as long as you will become the owner by the time the city council approves the project. And when we get into the key dates toward the end, we'll kind of let you know what that time frame is. But bottom line is you do eventually need to be the owner to move forward with the grant. Eligible improvements. So there's a long list here of eligible work. It's basically anything on the exterior that's going to preserve or restore the home. And so that includes things such as roof repairs, foundation repairs, any type of structural reinforcement, repairing exterior walls, masonry repointing or stucco repairs, exterior window and door repairs, porches, steps, cornices, parapets. Repainting is eligible if it is part of a larger project. The program is not intended to pay for just painting on its own. It's not the house painting grant. We really want you to do more substantial work as part of your grant. But if you've finished repointing the mortar on your painted brick home and then need to repaint it afterward, that's certainly encouraged. We want you to encourage repainting if it is part of a larger scope of work. If you've got an historic garage, guest house, or carport that you're going to be repairing as part of this project, that's eligible. And certainly if you have previous alterations that aren't really keeping with the historic character of the home that you want to reverse, that is also eligible work. Demolition of non-historic additions is eligible, and reconstruction of original architectural features is also eligible, provided that you have some documentation or evidence showing what those original features looked like. Then we can help fund their reconstruction. What we want to avoid is a lot of conjecture or guesswork. You know, I think my house had this, but I'm not really sure. If you're not sure, I would not submit an application guessing what was there. We want to be fairly certain that you're reconstructing an original feature of the home if you're going to submit an application to that effect. Also, engineering costs or soft costs are eligible if directly related to the eligible work. Let's say you had to have a structural engineer evaluate your home for structural repairs, and you did that a year ago. That's okay. You can get reimbursed for that as part of this program. You know, we will honor that as long as it wasn't more than 2 years ago and it is directly related to the work that you're proposing. It also cannot consist of more than 20% of the total funding request. And then we do have these technical, again, reports to help you with certain work items. If you're going to remove paint from masonry or clean masonry, these are very helpful. If you're going to repoint masonry, again, very helpful. But if you're going to propose removing paint from brick, we want to make sure that that's in keeping with the historic character of the home. A lot of homes were originally painted, and so we would not want you to submit a grant application in that scenario to remove a paint from a home that was originally painted. We would say, no, keep it painted. You want to change the color, that's up to you, but don't remove the paint unless we are absolutely sure that the paint is not original. Continuing on here, windows are a big component of historic homes, and we do get a lot of grant requests to repair historic windows, which is great. We strongly encourage that. If you've got original wood windows or steel windows, some of the later homes even have original aluminum windows now. Whatever the original windows were on your home, we strongly encourage you to retain those and to repair them. It's a great grant project to do that. You can, if you need to, replace the glass itself if the glass is broken, or let's say the glass is very thin and not energy efficient. There are several companies that will replace the glass for you as part of a window repair project and put in a hard coat low E glass. Sometimes if your sash is thick enough, you might even be able to do dual pane, but it's fairly rare. But at least doing a thicker single pane low E glass is something you could consider. Or if you don't want to replace the glass, you can put window film on. That will help reduce the, help improve the energy efficiency. So we encourage those types of projects. What we will discourage, however, is just total replacement of the entire window, the sash, the frame, everything unnecessarily. And most windows can be repaired. It takes some work and it takes the right expertise to do it. So we strongly encourage you to look at repairing your windows first. If for some reason you really can't repair them, let us know. We'll kind of give you some feedback. If we think you've got a case where replacement really is feasible, then we can consider that. But in the vast majority of cases, we're going to ask you to repair. If you've got windows that are missing, let's say your home had, it's a 1920s bungalow, would have had wood windows originally, and now it's got vinyl or aluminum or something that's clearly not historic. We can work with you on a grant application to put more historically appropriate windows back in. And so, consult with us on what, would be the best option there. And we can give you some guidance. And honestly, putting in a more historically appropriate window when the windows have clearly been replaced and are not appropriate is a good grant project. I want to mention there are some things that are not eligible. Additions to buildings. We're not going to pay for you to build a new addition to your home or any other new construction. We also generally don't pay for work to additions that are not historic. So, you know, if you've got a sizable addition on your home and it needs a lot of work, check with us before you submit the application. We may tell you to just limit the grant-funded work to the historic portion of the home. Also, landscaping is not eligible, fencing is not eligible, and other types of site improvements are not eligible. We are really limiting it to the bricks and mortar, essentially, of the home itself. I say bricks and mortar, but you might have a frame house, you might have a stucco house, which is fine, but really the exterior of the home itself, not the site, not the larger landscaping, that sort of thing. And as I mentioned previously, painting not eligible on its own, but if it's a component of a larger project, it can be included. So what are we looking for when you submit your application? How do we decide who gets funded and who doesn't get funded? So we have a panel that will meet and score the applications. The panel is largely staff, but we do have a couple of community members that join us for the panel, just so we can kind of get some different points of view. We typically will get a community member who represents a neighborhood association. We'll get somebody who might be a member of the city's Historic Preservation Commission. We might get somebody who's gone through the program before and has received grant funds and can give us perspective from the grant recipient's point of view. But so the panel will score the applications, and I will tell you, priority for funding will be given to applications that clearly demonstrate adherence to the city's preservation philosophy and general design guidelines for historic properties. So again, make sure what you're doing is historically appropriate. That's what's going to get you funded more than anything else. We also, again, want you to demonstrate proper rehab techniques based on historic preservation principles. Look at these bulletins that we've got on masonry, paint removal, window repairs, wood shingle roof replacements. We want you to follow that guidance when you submit your application. We also will give priority to projects that clearly address the most critical physical needs of the building. Those generally consist of roofs and foundations, because those are the two most critical work items on any home. The foundation fails, I mean, that's structural, that could be very bad for your home. If the roof obviously fails, that's very bad too. So those are the two types of work where we kind of give more points to when it comes to meeting physical needs, critical maintenance. But, you know, if you've got a very compelling window project, stucco repair, masonry repair, submit that too. And you'll probably do fairly well for those as well. Work that substantially improves the visual appearance of a neighborhood, streetscape, or an individually significant property. If, you know, the work you're doing is going to have a big impact on how this property looks in terms of making it, you know, return back to its historic appearance, that is fantastic. You'll get extra points for that. And again, as I mentioned before, if you have a non-contributing property in an historic district and the work you're doing is going to return it to contributing status, that scores very well. We strongly encourage that. Also, any work that encourages the investment of private funds to rehabilitate, improve, maintain, preserve, protect, and enhance deteriorated historic properties is great. So if you've got a property that's in really poor condition and you are going to fix it up, you know, that's going to do very well. And then obviously we want to make sure that you're completely addressing each question on the application, that the attachments that you're providing, particularly the cost estimates, the bids for the work items, are adequate. You know, if they're not, then, you know, it's going to hurt your score. And it might even end up with your application just getting flat out disqualified if you don't have sufficient information in the application. Points are also awarded to applications that reflect appropriate research on the home. We don't necessarily expect you to go crazy with this. And we actually have what we call an historic property inventory form that we use as a starting point, just to kind of familiarize you with the property. And I would start with that, but if you want to do some follow-up research on your own, that's great. But we at least want to make sure you understand kind of, when the house was built, what the style of the home was, what the materials are, features of the home, and that those are the things that you're looking to preserve with your project. We also will base your application score on the overall significance of the house, quality of the application, and adequacy of the construction bids. So those things together will make up your score and whether or not you ultimately get funding. Oh, sorry, the funding limits. So this is intended to provide a 50-50 match for the exterior work on your project. So I'm going to keep this real simple. Let's say you've got a roof that's going to cost $15,000. You can submit an application for that, and then if you're approved, the city will fund 50% of that. So $7,500 would be the city's share, and then you as the property owner would pay the other $7,500 or 50% of the project. And we can provide up to $20,000 as the city's share. So if you've got a project that's $40,000 total, the city can pay again $20,000. If your project exceeds $40,000, let's say you've got a $60,000 project, and I'm sorry, the city's maximum is still $20,000. You would have to pay the difference, but hey, it's still $20,000 you wouldn't get otherwise. So encourage you to apply if the $20,000 will help. Again, the minimum amount that we can provide is $5,000, and the property owner must agree to utilize the proceeds of the grant to perform the exterior rehab work on the structure in accordance with our design standards. And so how do you determine the dollar amount of your work? Well, we ask you to get a bid or an estimate from a contractor. And so that may include itemized estimates from general contractors, or perhaps a series of estimates from specific contractors or subcontractors, such as painters, masons, carpenters, roofers, etc. And so we're going to look at the dollar amount in those cost estimates. We have you attach those to your application, and that's what we base your grant funding on, is what those estimates say the work is going to cost. And so there you go. You are not required to select the lowest price. In fact, we really only require you to submit one cost estimate per work item. So if you're going to do the roof, we need a cost estimate for the roof. If you're going to do foundation, we'll need one cost estimate for the foundation, and so forth. If you want to provide more than one cost estimate, that's fine, but please just specify in the application which one you're choosing that your funding request is based on, so it's clear to us where your dollar amount in your application came from. Again, don't have to shop around and go for the lowest price. I mean, I understand if you would want to do that, you're certainly welcome to, but we actually encourage you to choose the person who is best qualified to perform the work. We really want you to use someone who's got some experience working on historic buildings, who you're comfortable with as the homeowner, and that as city staff, we can look at and say, okay, you have this person, they know what they're doing, they've done this before, and so that raises everybody's comfort level. I recognize it may not be all that easy to find someone who's qualified or experienced, and if that's the case, if you're really having difficulty finding a qualified contractor, let us know. There are some resources. The Arizona Preservation Foundation has a resource guide that they provide to the public as a courtesy. So folks that have some experience working on historic buildings, you can find that resource guide at azpreservation.org. Again, it's azpreservation.org. We can also, send it out and kind of come back to that at the end if we want. The city does not provide recommendations per se, just because, we're the city and our attorneys get nervous when we're telling people who they should use, but we will just encourage you to use somebody you feel good about. Also, using a licensed contractor, in particular somebody who's licensed, bonded, and insured, will give you a lot of peace of mind and recourse if something goes wrong. So there you go. We do have a caveat in here that a project may not be funded if a chosen contractor has a documented history of not performing. That's rare. I really can't think of anybody who we would put in that category right now, but just know, you want somebody who's going to do good work and that you're not going to have to stress over. I will mention that building permit fees are not eligible for grant funding. Those are the sole responsibility of the owner. So don't include those as part of your grant cost. Those have to be done separately. As far as commencement and deadlines, so we really don't want you to start until you've submitted your application has been approved by the city council, and you've signed all of the necessary agreements. And that's just, eliminates any risk that might come up, because honestly, until we have all those things in place, there's a possibility the grant might not work. And so you're really best off if you can wait until those three things happen. And then we'll know for sure that you're ready and eligible to receive the grant funds. You can start work and we can start paying you the grant funds as you go along. Now, there are some exceptions to that. We have had some projects where, there have been delays for various reasons. Sometimes it takes a while to get a building permit. We realize that's not your fault. That's the city's fault. Maybe there's some other aspects of the work that don't require a building permit that you want to start on beforehand. In that scenario, maybe it's okay for you to start early. We also have, work that might be very critical, like a foundation needs to get done or a roof needs to get done, and you're willing as the owner to kind of take the risk and start on that before everything's in place. That's up to you. If you want to assume that risk, you can, but just know, until we get all the agreements signed and everything in place, there is some risk involved. So it is generally best to wait until all those things are in place and then you start work. So yeah, this is not necessarily a quick process. It may be a few months before all those things are done and you're ready to start. So just keep that in mind. And when we hit the key dates later on, you'll kind of see how that time frame works. We do expect you to start work around July 1st of next year, which is the beginning of our new fiscal year. And then the expectation is that you would have 2 years to complete the work. And so we would expect you to be done by June 30th of 2027. We have on occasion granted extensions for, really unforeseen circumstances. During COVID, during the pandemic, we ended up granting some extensions, obviously, because that was unforeseen. But for the most part, we really do want you to finish within 2 years. So how do you submit your application? In years past, going back several years, we'd have you submit a hard copy, and actually it was multiple hard copies. And then in the last 3 years or so, we had you submit via email. That has now changed. We now want you to upload your files to the city's file sharing site. And that site is called ServeU. We will send you a link to the ServeU file sharing site. And then once you receive that link, you can go ahead and upload your grant files to the site. And then we can view them and download them from there once they've been uploaded on your end. How do you get the link to ServeU? Good question. Starting on September 23rd, we will have links available on request. So shoot us an email and ask for a link starting September 23rd, and we will gladly send you one. And we will do that up until 5 p.m. on November 13th. That is our cutoff for sending links to applicants. So between September 23rd and November 13th, let us know. We'll send you a link. And each link will be a unique link that will only be accessible to you as the applicant, city staff, and our grant panel members. We're not going to share your link with everybody in the public. Although do know that, if you submit a grant application, it could, at some point become part of the public record. So you don't want to submit, anything that you don't want people to see down the road, but just know that the link that you get is going to be specific to you. And then, so again, the deadline to request the link is November 13th, which is a Wednesday. And then you have 2 days after that until Friday, November 15th to upload all of your files to the link. And so 5 p.m. Friday, November 15th, we want you to have all of your materials uploaded to our file sharing site. And that's when we as city staff are going to start downloading them and start reviewing them and scoring them. So please make sure you meet that deadline. Well, those 2 deadlines, get the link by Wednesday, November 13th, and make sure everything's uploaded by Friday, November 15th. If you try to upload files after November 15th, they'll be rejected, or you just won't even be able to upload them, period. So make sure that you get everything uploaded and that you're not missing anything. Applications that miss crucial elements such as the cost estimates, the photos, or the site plan will probably get rejected up front. So just know they do need to be complete. And so here's the process in a nutshell. Once we receive the applications, we make sure they're complete. Eligible applications are forwarded to the panel to be competitively ranked. And number 3, panel recommendations then are forwarded to the full Historic Preservation Commission for consideration. For those who may not know, the commission is a 9-member body that is appointed by the mayor and council to oversee historic preservation activities here for the city. They make recommendations to the mayor and council, and then that would be the next step. Typically, there's a city council subcommittee that would review the recommendations before the final approval is granted in a city council formal meeting. And then usually at that point, we'll let you know of the city council decision. We may even reach out to you prior to that, just to let you know that your item has been recommended for approval, but we will confirm the final city council approval. And then at that point, we'll work with you to get registered as a vendor in the city's financial system. That has to happen so that we can, write checks to you. So if we're going to, give you a check for your grant, we do need you to be registered in our system as a vendor. It's the term that's used. Anybody that we issue payment to is called a vendor. So we have to have you sign up to receive checks from the city. And that requires logging on, setting up an account with a user ID and password. And then we also will schedule a time for you to come in and meet with us to sign the grant agreements. If you have a mortgage company or lien holder of any sort, we will also need them to consent to the grant funding and the deed of conservation easement. And so we will need them to sign that consent agreement before we can issue any grant funds. And I will tell you, this can be the biggest delay in starting your work. And mortgage companies in recent years have become more and more demanding in terms of what they want to process these. Some of them are real easy to work with. They will turn it around in a couple weeks and say, yep, here you go, no problem. Others will make you jump through a whole bunch of hoops. They'll require a processing fee. They will require a whole bunch of documentation that either you or our office will need to provide. In some cases, they might even ask for an appraisal. And we've been pretty good at talking them out of appraisals, but there's been a couple times lately where we have not been able to do that. So we strongly encourage you to reach out to your mortgage company sooner rather than later, even before you submit to the application, and let them know you're working on this, and to make that contact and give us whoever the best contact person is in the application. We may or may not require a project sign to be posted in front of your property. We haven't done this in recent years, but it is something we might go back to now, especially with the bond program. So just know in past years, there have been signs posted in front of grant projects. That may be the case again. The contractual requirements, we will receive a title report once you've been approved for funding. That will just tell us, number one, you are in fact the owner of record of the property. Number two, if there are any mortgages or liens on the property, we'll have evidence of that as well. And then the consent agreement, as I mentioned before, we need this from the lien holder. And if you can give us the name of contact person for your mortgage company that deals with these things, that helps tremendously. I cannot emphasize enough how much that speeds up the process and makes it so much easier for us to get the documents signed in a timely manner. The program agreement is fairly straightforward. Again, I encourage you to read through these documents. Basically just says, here's who our agreement is with, here's how much money the grant is for, here's the time frame in which the work is going to be completed, and here's the scope of work for the grant. It's pretty straightforward. And then the deed of conservation easement, this, folks may have some questions about this, but this is the document that, you know, the city, unfortunately, as much as we like you and as much as we want you to repair your home, we cannot legally just give you money without getting something in return. The Arizona State Constitution does not allow cities to gift money to private property owners. So in exchange for the money that the city is offering you to do work on the property, the city has to receive something back in return. And what we receive is a conservation easement, which is basically just an agreement that we enter into, the owner and the city, for a period of time that says, hey, we mutually agree we're going to preserve this property. And it's usually for either 15 or 20 years, depending on the dollar amount of the grant. And so we just will mutually agree that you're not going to tear the house down. You're not going to substantially modify it. In exchange for the grant funds, you're going to do the work, and then the property is going to stay historic for up to 20 years afterward. But for us to record that and have it run with the land, that's where we need the mortgage company's consent. So that's why we reach out to them. And then last but not least, we will also need your insurance company to provide proof that the property is insured. If we're gonna, give the grant funding and the city's gonna enter into this conservation easement, we wanna make sure you got insurance on your property. And that there's enough insurance that, let's say something on the property gets damaged, you'll be able to repair it. Also, we do ask for liability insurance if somebody gets injured on the property. We want to make sure that you'll be able to defend yourself through your insurance company, and that the insurance company will also help defend the city in that case, in case somebody decides, oh, I slipped on this person's driveway, I'm going to sue them, and I'm going to sue the city because the city's got conservation easement on this property. We want to make sure that, both you and we are protected in that case. You shouldn't have to add any additional coverage to your insurance policy, but you might have to add the city as an additional party on the policy. And it's usually pretty easy, but sometimes insurance companies will have questions about why you're doing it, and we're happy to answer those questions if they come up. And then finally, we've got disbursement of funds. You may say, okay, I've got a $20,000 grant project. Do I have to do the entire thing before I'm going to see that $20,000 back in my pocket? The answer is no, unless, of course, you want to do it that way. We will provide up to 3 draws. So you can actually get paid 3 different times as you do the work. You don't have to wait till the very end. Let's say you've got a scope of work that includes 3 different items. Let's say you're going to start with your foundation. When that's done, we can pay you a first draw for the foundation. Say your second roof work item is your roof, then we can pay you for the roof. And then your third item is windows, and we can pay you for that at the end. Or, if you've just got one item that you want to kind of phase it, say, okay, I'm going to submit a request at the 40% mark, and then another one at the 80% mark, and then another one at the end. You can do it that way. You can split it up pretty much however you want. that it's reasonable and works with however your contractor is billing you. It's entirely up to you. Or if you want to wait until the very end and just submit one draw for $20,000 or whatever your amount is at the end, you can do that too. It's up to you. And then just know when you submit the request, we'll come out and look at the work just to make sure it got done per our agreement. And we'll usually take some photos just to document that the work was completed. Then we'll come back. Helena, as our historic preservation officer, will sign and approve the payment request. It'll go to our finance department for processing, and they will cut you a check. They will insist on mailing it, and it will go to the address in your vendor account that you've registered under. And it can take up to 45 days for those checks to get issued. So just know it's not a quick turnaround because there's a lot of checks the city's issuing, but ultimately you will get a check mailed to you. And that's how it works. So that covers the program guide. I'm going to go through the grant application here pretty quickly because we're already at 6:47. But we do want you to go ahead and just in the application form, put your property address, your name, your mailing address, etc., email address. Be sure to include this important information. And we have created this application is a fillable form. It's a fillable PDF. You should be able to just type right into it. We've tried to make it fairly easy. You know, if you're old school and you want to print a hard copy and handwrite it, that's fine. We've done some of those, but we are trying to make it as easy as possible for you to fill this out and submit it electronically. Question number one, we just want to know what you know about the historical and architectural significance of the property, including when it was built. And this is where we want you to attach a copy of the historic property inventory form. And if you don't have a copy of that for your house, reach out to us. We're happy to provide one. We want you to have it. It's a great resource, a good starting point. If you decide you want to do some additional research beyond that, you can. But the whole point of the inventory form is so you've got a starting point, got a basis to know at least some basic information about your home. I will mention there are a couple of neighborhoods where not every house has an inventory form. Willow and Encanto Palmcroft are the two where we still have some gaps. And we have been working this past year on filling in some of the gaps in Willow. We hope to continue to fill those in and maybe fill in some in Encanto Palmcroft here in the near future as well. But if for some reason your house does not have an historic property inventory form, we'll kind of send you what alternative information we've got. You will not be penalized if your house does not have an inventory form, but just let us know, as you fill this out. Hey, my house was one of the few that didn't have a form. Number two is let us know your scope of work. What work are you proposing? And, there's not a lot of room here to type. If you want to attach a continuation sheet, you can. But we're hoping that you can be fairly succinct and just tell us what you're doing. And hopefully your contractor estimates will help tell part of the story too about the work you're proposing. But we do want to know, like if you're doing a roofing project, what is the roof currently and what material you're proposing? Is it going to be compatible? If you're putting new shingles on the roof, is it going to be an asphalt shingle roof? Is it dimensional or 3-tab asphalt? Are you also going to be repairing the decking underneath? That sort of thing. Try to give us a pretty good idea of what you're doing so we don't have to guess. And if we end up having to guess, it could hurt your score. So make it pretty clear what you're proposing to do. And again, if you need more room, feel free to add a continuation sheet, tack another sheet on if you have to. Number three is to briefly describe the rehabilitation work that you have done on the property, or if a previous owner did it and you're aware of it, that's fine too. Let us know when that work was done. If you are new to the property and you don't know all the work that's been done, that's fine. We're not going to penalize you for that. If you have a ballpark guess, go ahead and give that to us. It's fine. But it does help us to know, things that have been done previously. And that also ties into number 4, which is, do you have a larger plan for the property? And maybe, you know, number three would be like, okay, yeah, we did the foundation 2 years ago. Now we're going to do the roof. And so, and then after the roof, we're going to come back later and do certain other things. That helps us if we look at the property and we're like, okay, it looks like there's, you know, maybe more than one thing that needs to get done here. Telling us what your overall plan is helps us know, okay, they've thought about all this. They've got a logical plan and they're approaching it correctly. And so that really just puts our minds at ease and helps us know that you've got a vision for what you're going to do with the property. Number 5 is, how will the proposed project positively impact historic property and streetscape, and will it be visible from the street? And so, you know, we want to encourage work where you're going to look at it afterward and be like, oh yeah, hey, they did a nice job here. They really did help restore the historic appearance of the home. You know, some type of work is going to have more of an impact than others. That's just the nature of it. Doing foundation repair, nobody may see it, but it's fairly crucial to having a, you know, a repaired foundation. So you might not score really strong here, but you will score very well for a foundation under number 6, where it's a serious maintenance problem affecting the physical condition of the property. So these two can kind of balance each other out. You know, let's say you're going to, you know, case I mentioned earlier, where you've got an enclosed porch and you're going to reopen that porch. That is going to have a big positive impact on the property, but maybe it's not a serious maintenance problem. Whereas the foundation, you might not really see the difference afterward, but it's going to affect, you know, it's going to repair a serious problem. So don't be too concerned if, you know, you have a really good answer under number 5, but not 6, or vice versa. The two kind of tend to balance each other out. And then finally, you know, we want you to let us know how much it's going to cost. And so this is where you attach your bids. Again, minimum $5,000, maximum $20,000. That should be clear. So, you know, if you're going to do a roof, that should be listed here, scope item roof. The name of your contractor should be here. So let's say Smith Roofing Company, and then the dollar amount of the roof estimate should be in this column here. And then so on, you know, for windows, stucco repair, masonry repointing, whatever. List out those items for us, give us the name of the contractor, and give us the corresponding dollar amount. The form should calculate for you. So if you plug in amounts here, it will add it up at the bottom and then divide it in half to give us the city share, the 50%. And then again, we want the information on lien holders. There's another page at the end here that addresses that. Last but not least, we've got the attachments here. These are fairly important. So please, again, make sure you're attaching the historic property inventory form. Make sure you're attaching at least one cost estimate from a qualified contractor for each scope item. Engineer's report, this is only needed if you're doing structural work. If you're not doing structural work, you don't need to worry about this. And then the photos. So we do want to get a good number of photos for the work that you're doing. You should have at least 2 photographs for each scope of work item. And then we also want additional photos showing the overall house and property. So, you know, take some photos from the street, kind of show us what does it look like from the front, you know, maybe some photos from the back too, if that's relevant. This will really help us kind of understand the property. We're not going to go out and visit the site. The panel members won't, staff won't. We're going to rely very heavily on your photos and the documentation you submit in the report to understand the property and understand the work you're proposing. We actually do want the original photo files to be submitted with your application. So the JPEG files or PNG files, unfortunately, we can't use HEIC files. We use Windows. Microsoft it doesn't like that file type. So please, you know, make sure they're either JPEG or PNG format. And they should not have anything superimposed on the photos, you know, no text, arrows, etc. Just give us those original photo files that we can look at. Now, if you do want to, you know, do a PDF that has the photos in the PDF and has some captions explaining, what's in the photo. And, maybe it's even numbered and those numbers are key to your site plan. That's fantastic. We would certainly welcome that, but that should not take the place of the actual photo files. We would want you to submit the PDF and still submit the photo files too. So just make sure you've got all of that when you submit and upload to the city's file share site. And then we also do need a site plan for every application. We're going to show you some examples of what the site plan looks like here in just a moment. But at a minimum, the site plan should include the location of property lines, streets, alleys, and easements. It should include an outline or footprint of all the existing buildings on the site, which would include your house, detached garage, etc. If you got sheds, anything else, just let us know on the site plan where those structures are located. Site plan should also show driveways, parking areas, sidewalks, swimming pools, fences, walls, etc. And it should also point out where the work is that you are proposing. For example, if you're repairing windows, show those on the site plan. If you are proposing, to do roofing project, point to the building on the site plan where the roof's going to get repaired. And so we do need a site plan for every application. Make sure you don't forget the site plan. You'll see in some of the examples we're going to share here in just a moment, the site plan does not need to be professionally done. You can draw it yourself. It just needs to be reasonably done to scale so that, if you look at it, we can still kind of tell what's going on. Using graph paper or something like that is fine, just to kind of get the scale right. But you don't need to hire an architect or a professional to draw it for you. We're not looking for that level of site plan. Elevations. Now, most applications will not require elevations or these archival documents either. It really just depends on your project. If you are, like I said, maybe reopening a front porch, we will want elevations, showing the front of the house, a drawing that shows the front of the house in that case, to see what's the front of the house going to look like once that porch enclosure is gone. So in that case, we would need an elevation, but in most cases, you won't need to provide it. And then archival documents, again, if you're trying to reconstruct something that has disappeared, we will want some document that shows what you're basing the reconstruction on, whether it's a photo, if you're lucky enough to have an original plan set, or maybe the historic property inventory form that we provided from the 1980s shows something that's now gone. That documentation is necessary in that case. And then again, we've already covered the application submission process, so I'm not going to hit that again, but just be familiar with those deadlines. And yeah, we will have you sign and date the application form. And that's pretty much the whole thing. So with that, we're going to move on past the application packet and go to the key dates. And I'll hand it over to our other staff to take it from here.
All right, so these are the key dates that Kevin kind of went over. So if you want to screenshot this page, this is probably a good slide to be aware of, or you can reference the recording at the end. So tonight is the virtual grant workshop. That's the first one on this list. And then as Kevin mentioned, not this coming Monday, but the Monday after, the 23rd, those application links will be available. So you can reach out to our office. It's probably best to email us at historic@Phoenix.gov, and then we can email you back with that link. November 13th is the deadline to request that application link. So if you request it on the 23rd, you'll be able to upload until the deadline which is the 15th, the deadline to upload the application materials. So if you want to go ahead and request that link on the 23rd, probably a good idea, and don't wait until the 13th. Then in December of this year, the staff advisory panel will meet and will score all of the applications. And then in January, the Historic Preservation Commission will make a recommendation on as far as which projects will be selected and which ones won't. And that will be the recommendation to City Council for approval, which is slated for February of 2025. As Kevin did mention, we may notify applicants if you were selected or if you weren't for this round prior to that February approval. And that's just, so if you want to get a head start on that vendor registration or reaching out to your lien holder, it's a really good time to do that. Then in March, we'll need your vendor registration. That's really crucial to get that done on time so that we can reserve the funds for you. And then in April, we will have those legal agreements signed. That's that program agreement. And we'll take a look over the deed of conservation easement as well. And then in June, those grant funds will be reserved. Then July, the work usually begins. And then in June of 2027, the work should be completed. So, and that will take us to the next slide. So these are the final points to consider. So number one, make sure your work meets the preservation philosophy. Super important. That's really going to help your score when the panel meets and reviews the applications. That preservation philosophy is linked throughout that program guide. I believe it's also on the application. It's on our website. If you need help with that, please feel free to reach out to our office and we can go over that or send that to you. Second thing, get your inventory form as soon as possible. So if you wait until the 23rd, you can email us for your inventory form and we can send you the application link. So that might be something to consider. That's good to get as soon as possible, not only because you'll submit it with your application, but that should be the basis for your information that you're going to provide on your application as well. Then number three, get your contractor estimate as soon as possible. Don't wait until the last minute on this one because sometimes contractors, aren't going to get back to you and turn that around as soon as you might need it. So make sure you get those in as soon as possible. And you know how much money you're going to request. Fourth thing is be sure to include the photo files. So as Kevin mentioned, you can do a PDF with captions, but make sure that you include those actual photo files with nothing else on the picture to us so that we can take a look at that, not just of the work that or the area that's going to have work proposed, but just of the overall house as well. And then number 5, include a site plan. So every project will require a site plan. Even if you're not proposing any changes to the site, and the site plan may look this exact same before your project and after your project, we still need a site plan. That's a great opportunity to make a key for your photos so we can orient ourselves to the site. As mentioned, we're not going to do a site visit to each property prior to scoring them. So this is really a good opportunity for you to tell us everything about your property, all of the plans. It's good to note on there what's proposed. If you have any future projects planned in mind, that's a good place to note that. And then number 6, probably the most important, get in touch with your lien holder as soon as possible and provide that contact information in the application. So if you can reach out to your lien holder and find a specific person that we can contact and discuss and kind of get that ball rolling prior to selection, that's really going to help you. That that really is the biggest reason for delay in a lot of projects. Sometimes they request a lot of information. You might need a third-party authorization form, but you won't know that until you kind of get through all of the things it takes to get to a specific person on that. So that's something that can be done ahead of time. So that's really going to save you some time and get you closer to starting on your project. And then the last one, don't wait until the last minute to request that application link or to upload your application materials. So our application process is a little bit different this year. So just keep that in mind. You know, a lot of times with stuff like this, if you wait until the last minute, you're trying to upload and then, you know, it all goes wonky. We don't want that to happen. So just be aware of those deadlines and make sure you get them all uploaded. And if you have any issues with that, you know, prior to, feel free to reach out to us and we can help you troubleshoot that. But yes, all right. And then with that, I will pass it to Desiree. Oh, well, we've got some examples first. So this is one of the inventory forms. They're not all going to look like this. Sometimes they are multiple pages. Sometimes they've got a little bit more information than this. Sometimes they're older and we've got an update form. So this is just an example. A lot of times they'll just have that basic information and a photograph from when it was inventoried. So that's a good starting point for your application information. And then I believe we've got some site plan examples. So again, they don't have to be professional plans. Try to get it to scale as much as possible. Make sure you've got your scope of work on there. We've got a couple examples of window projects. So this is great, having it color coded for the roof and the masonry areas. And you can see the detached building in that one as well. And then here's a window project. So these are really great to, you know, it's keyed to the window, but if you've got pictures from, you know, the north side or something like that, maybe you could use letters or something to key that on there as well. All right, now I'll pass it to Desiree.
Thank you. All right, so now we're at common questions and answers. So the first common question we get is, can I do the work myself? You can do the work yourself, but we would only be able to pay for the cost of materials. So you would need to have a contractor if you're intending to include labor as part of the grant application. Are you required to use a licensed contractor? The answer is maybe. It depends on your scope of work. So we recommend checking with the residential services of the Phoenix Planning and Development Department to first confirm if you need a permit, because certain scopes of work covered by the grant may not actually require a permit. Others will require a permit. And then the second question is whether a licensed contractor is required. A couple examples: if you're doing window repair, you actually wouldn't need a permit. If you're doing foundation repair, you will need a permit, and as well as a licensed contractor. New roofs may or may not require a permit. It depends on how many layers of the roof you're intending to replace. The next question: can non-contributing properties receive grant funds? Generally, no. However, there are some exceptions. We will allow it if the work you're proposing will make it a contributor to the historic district. And Kevin touched on this a little bit earlier, but one example could be, if there was an original front porch on your home that was enclosed at some point, or you're intending to reverse that alteration, and you're going to reopen it and restore it back to how it was. And if that were to make it a contributing building, then we would consider, or we would accept your application for grant funds. Another exception may be if your property is close to the district boundaries. In some cases, we might accept the application if a case can be made that it maybe would fall within the boundaries, or we're in some cases looking to extend boundaries of the district. So if you're in that kind of gray area, if you're really close to the district boundaries, don't hesitate to check with our office. And generally, if you were unsure or have questions, we recommend that you check with us. And the next question is, can I apply if I don't own the property? Yes, if the owner is willing to sign a letter of authorization on your behalf. If you're in the process of purchasing a home, for example, we would wait to sign the grant program agreement until you officially own the property. The program agreement and other legal agreements, including the easement, will need to be signed by the legal owner. But generally, we won't start working on those agreements until February of 2025. So there's a bit of time there. How do I find documentation of what my home originally looked like? We always suggest starting with the inventory form, which you can get from our office by sending us an email. We don't have inventory. We may or may not have an inventory form on file, but we do for a lot of properties. You might be able to find photos through aerial photographs or by doing some research on newspaper.com. Similarly, you're welcome to visit our website or reach out to us. We do have resources available for doing historic building research. You can also gather information from permit research that might be able to paint a picture of alterations, or maybe we have historic plans available, and you can conduct a public records request through the city planning department. Are there grant funds, are the grant funds taxable income? No, you should not have to pay any taxes on the grant because we are purchasing an easement from you. It's sale, it's not actually income. Can I sell my home if it has a conservation easement? Yes, the conservation easement runs with the land, so there's nothing preventing you from selling it. If you do sell your home, you just need to disclose that there's a conservation easement on it, which adds an additional layer of protection beyond the historic designation. Can I apply again if I've already received grant funds? Yes, you can apply again, or you can phase the work and apply for different projects. I guarantee you would get funding for the second round. If you do apply and we issue a second grant, we would tack on additional years to your easement. So we would have a new easement and corresponding with the amount of grant funds that you would be getting. See, can I apply if I'm a City of Phoenix employee? Yes, unless you work for the Planning and Development Department or are a member of the Historic Preservation Commission. But we have had employees in other departments apply successfully. Does the property have to be owner occupied? No, if the property does not need to be owner occupied, non-owner occupied homes are eligible for grants.
All right, thank you. Well, this is the time where we've kind of wrapped up the presentation and we're ready to answer any questions that have come up in the Q&A.
Got a lot. We've got a lot of
right.
questions.
All right, Helena, go ahead and give us one, and we'll just kind of take some turns answering it here as best we can.
All right. So would a brick wall around a yard and along the street be eligible?
I'll go ahead and field that one to start. Unfortunately, no. The grant program is really just limited to buildings, historic buildings. So site features, even though they might be historic and merit preservation, are not eligible under the grant program, unfortunately. I'm sorry.
And the next one, which came, I think, right before you talked about the Arizona Preservation Foundation website, was if there was a vendor list that specializes in historic repairs. So yes, the azpreservation.org does have a resource guide, a little button at the very top of the webpage. All right, so this question is, a roof is an item that would be covered by the grant. Work on additions is not. What about roof work that is both over the original structure and the addition?
I can take that one.
Yeah.
It gets a little complicated in those cases. I mean, if it's not, you know, feasible to separate the two, then yes, we would fund the roof over the addition. I think a scenario where we would clearly say no is if you've got, you know, an accessory building that was built recently. In that case, we'd say, yeah, we don't pay for that. But if you've got a roof that spans both the historic home and a later addition, I think we would honor that.
All right. The next question is from, let's see, Mandy. Is it anticipated that the start time for our approved projects would be July 2025, or could it be sooner? Mara.
I'll answer that. It could be sooner. If all of the agreements have been signed. I don't know that we've had any that have started sooner than our I guess suggested timeline. If you get a head start with your lien holder, that will, you know, really make a big difference in that timeline. So I guess it's possible to start before then if everything is checked off.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. You could start earlier once if you know you've been approved, but haven't had the documents all signed yet. I mean, you could do it, but there's definitely some risk involved. If for some reason the lien holder just refuses to sign, you know, then we may not be able to issue the grant funds. So just know there's definitely risk involved if you start sooner.
All right. Stephanie asks, are only original elements of a property eligible for the grant? Desiree, are you feeling it?
Generally, yes. Um, you know, occasionally you have a situation where later alterations may have gained significance in their own right, or to the question that we had about the roof, you know, there could be some wiggle room if there's a strong argument for it. So I would suggest checking with our office before, you know, if you have any questions before investing time on an application.
All right. And Julia asks, how does one get a neighborhood designated as a historic neighborhood? Specifically, boroughs at 13th Street south of McDowell, or is it possible to have a specific home included to qualify for a grant? This home is from 1926.
I think that's a discussion that we might have to have offline. But no, you are correct that it does have to be listed to receive the grant. And if a property is not listed, that process takes a few months to go through. So it's not going to happen by November 13th, unfortunately. But it's something we can certainly have a separate conversation with you about if you think there's a home or neighborhood that might be a good candidate.
All right, let's see. Melody asks, would it be appropriate to ask for more than one item of work? For example, foundation improvements as well as roof structural reinforcement due to water damage.
I
They're
can
not,
take it.
yeah?
Yeah. Yeah, you can have multiple eligible items for your scope of work. It just really needs to be between 5,000 and 20,000 for your requested funding. So if you've got a roof project that's not quite $40,000 and you want to add in some foundation work to get you up to requesting 20,000, then yeah, absolutely. Likewise, if your project, you know, you somehow end up with some leftover money, if you've got some eligible items, that's something that can be discussed later on at that time as well.
All right. Gary asks, will the conservation easement cause the house to be devalued if you try to sell it?
I can take that one. That's a good question. We have never seen that. It's possible if you've got, a house that's in the downtown area and zoned high rise or something like that, that it could end up happening. But I will tell you, the homes that are in our residential historic districts, first of all, doing work on them and improving them tends to increase the value. And then the conservation easement tends to help protect that value. So my experience has been the answer is no. In the historic districts, it's only helped. But I could envision a scenario, like I said, if you were an individually listed property surrounded by high rises, you might potentially think twice in that case. But if I were a homeowner in a historic district, I don't think there's anything to be concerned about.
And the regulatory framework is pretty much there already with the overlay zoning. So already being designated, sort of the requirements for design review you have to go through are it's subtly different at most with a conservation easement as it is with what you already have with the historic designation.
Yeah, we've done over 600 easements in this program, and I have never really seen any of them adversely affect a property's value. I can say pretty confidently that that's the case.
And then the follow-up question to that from Gary is as whether or not the easement would impact real estate taxes. Which there's not really anything that would be directly related to the real estate taxes with the conservation easement.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect it to. Again, if you've already got historic designation because you're in a district, the conservation easement really isn't going to change the valuation or the tax that you would pay.
All right, Melody asked for the insurance requirements. Is the city only eligible for the percentage of the money they grant versus the money the home is worth? Kevin, I'm going to let you do
You
that
may
one.
need to repeat that one. Not sure I
Okay.
followed that one.
For the insurance requirements, is the city only eligible for the percentage of the money that we grant versus the money the home is worth? So if there was a claim, for total, yeah.
Yeah, so what we would ask is, I mean, chances are, I've yet to see a case where we received a grant request for a property that didn't have adequate coverage. So chances are the coverage that you've got on your home, which is likely dictated by your mortgage company, is already sufficient. And so what we would typically require is that the city be added to that policy. So then if for some reason, and I'll use a classic example, in Willow several years ago, there was a monsoon and a large tree that fell on the front of someone's house that happened to have a conservation easement. And fortunately, they had insurance coverage and they were able to use the insurance proceeds to repair the damage. Because the city was part of that policy, we were able to, we were included in that whole process. And yeah, we agreed like, yep, go ahead and repair it. Got repaired, and everything was back to normal after that. So I guess I'm not sure how to answer the question just in terms of monetary value.
I guess then
But,
it maybe seems like the question is, I mean, I should back up and say that really the goal of the insurance is not that we are going to recoup the grant funds that we have given you. And that's kind of what the question makes it sound like, and that's not actually the goal of us being listed.
I mean, it does help protect the city's investment, knowing that your property is insured and you will have the ability to make repairs if needed. Now, we also have a scenario in our agreement that says that if it's a total loss of the property, we will not make you repair it under that scenario. You can, demo the thing and build new if you have to, and the easement will go away. But, assuming the damage is repairable, we will want you to repair it. And then the city will also have some liability protection to being part of the policy. But that's really the intent of our involvement in the insurance. Nothing beyond that.
All right. Julia asks, who can we email for the inventory form? Desiree.
You can send an email to historic@Phoenix.gov, and we will assist you.
Yep, the email inbox is monitored, so you will get a quick response, and you can always also call our main phone number, which is monitored as well. But obviously the email's nice because then you can give us your property address at the same time. We can pull it up and look at it before we get back to you. But if you have any questions, our number is 602-261-8699. Right, Kevin?
That is correct. 602-261-8699.
All right. Jeff says his home does not have an inventory form, but again, you can go ahead and email us if that's the case. We'll see what information we have on file, if there's any other things that we have in our records that kind of document the property that could be of use. So feel free to go ahead and email us to see what we do have on file. And then there's a question is, can a portion of the proposal be accepted while a portion is rejected?
Oh, that's a good one. I'll take that one just
All right.
because this has come up in the past. The answer is usually no. In fact, I'm trying to think of an exception and I cannot think of one. It's possible there's something that happened prior to me, but I can tell you since I've been here, we pretty much have to score your application as it's submitted, on the merits. So, if there's part of it that we really like and part of it that just like, oh no, they're like proposing to tear part of the house down, where unfortunately we got to kind of like, consider both the good and the bad when we score it. We can't just say, all right, we're going to fund this part we like and just kind of pretend the other part doesn't exist. So that's why it's generally best to check with us before you submit, send us an email, shoot something by us if you're not sure. We really do want to help you, and it's in our best interest as staff to coach you to submitting the best quality application you can that has the best chance of getting funded. We really don't enjoy rejecting applications or telling people, oh, sorry, you didn't make the cut. We want to be able to help you make the cut and get funded. So if you're unsure about something or have questions, run it by us. We're happy to give you some feedback. But yeah, unfortunately, we got to consider the whole thing when we score it.
All right. What if a project requires additional costs beyond initial estimate by the contractor? So, I mean, we can still only reimburse of what we've committed to. So if effectively, if what gets approved by city council is, $15,000, unfortunately, that is the maximum amount that we can reimburse, even if, the final costs are greater than you anticipated.
Yeah, once the council approves a specific dollar amount for the project, we are really locked into that. Now, if you get to a point where it's so bad that you're like, you know what, I'm going to come back and file a second application next year, and it's pretty compelling, you might be able to get that approved second time around. But once we've got, an application approved with a specific dollar amount, we really can't change it.
All right, Jeff asks, Are prevention items able to be included? If I were to complete a foundation repair and any underground plumbing leaks needed to be sealed, would that work be included?
That's a good question. If it was something that the structural engineer was specifically recommending, I think we would consider it. Although generally speaking, we don't pay for plumbing, mechanical, or electrical, but we will pay for grading and drainage. If you have water that's pooling up around a foundation, and let's say you do the foundation work, but the grading and drainage is still bad, until you fix that grading and drainage, the problem is going to continue. So that is something we can pay for. And if plumbing leaks fall into the same category, I think we would entertain that as something that could be potentially eligible as part of the foundation project.
All right, Julia asked who we can reach out to if we're just outside of the boundaries of a district. Yeah, feel free to go ahead and send that email to historic@phoenix.gov, or you can also call again 602-261-8699. I feel like an old school fundraiser. Okay, let's see. Will the conservation easement limit ability to submit new permits for work on the property? For instance, a casita, block perimeter wall, enclosed garage, or new modifications to a front porch? Mara, if you would like to. So, does it limit the ability to submit for new permits?
It depends. So, I'm not sure what the front porch portion of that question was. So if you are looking to repair the front porch, like in kind with what was originally there, something like that, no, that's kind of going along with the conservation easement. The easement will give our office more of an opportunity to review work on the property that may not otherwise be reviewed, such as windows. But it doesn't necessarily prohibit you from doing future work. It would just be more of an opportunity for us to review all of the work that you're proposing, whether or not it would need a permit or may have not needed review prior to having the easement, just to make sure that what you're doing is not going to negatively impact the house. Obviously, if we've got an easement on it, we want to make sure that the property remains to be a contributing property to the district, or if it's individually eligible, that it maintains that ability to convey its significance. So hopefully, if you're going through this grant program and you get a conservation easement, you're not in the future going to propose work that would negatively impact that or undo that work. But yeah, so I hope that answers your question. If you have specific plans in mind, definitely reach out to us. We're happy to kind of walk you through that. But yeah.
Just to add to that, our intention with the easement is not to freeze your property in time. You can still make changes to it, but we would just ask, make sure that those changes follow the preservation philosophy and the general design guidelines. That's kind of the case now, even without an easement. If you're in an historic district, we want you to follow the preservation philosophy and general design guidelines. But once you get the easement, we're really going to want you to follow those things. So, but yes, you can still make changes along those lines.
All right, Jeff also says, I would like to complete a roof replacement. Will I be limited to certain style or material for the roof, i.e. if I wanted asphalt roof or a tile roof?
I can take that one. Like the grant, we're only going to be able to fund things that we would normally approve under our restoration guidelines. So last year, for example, if people had projects, concepts that they wanted to share before they submitted the grant application, we would see people come in and visit us to talk to us at our counter, our public counter, and you can set up an appointment. So you're actually also able to come in and visit us in person, as well as, you know, via email or on the phone. So if you have any questions about whether a project is something we would even approve, then I would recommend following up on that. But in general, with a roof replacement, we would be looking at in-kind replacement or like-for-like replacement. If there's an acceptable alternative, so, you know, asphalt, sometimes we can replace other materials with asphalt if it's deemed compatible, but really it's a case-by-case basis. We'll need to look at the roof form and at the materials that are there now and what historically. Sometimes, you know, roofs change, roof materials change, right? So if you're going from a non-original roof material back to something more compatible, then we might, you know, we could look at that. However, if you were trying to do a completely new roof form that wasn't historic or a totally different material, like say if it never had tile and you want to do tile, we wouldn't likely, we wouldn't approve that, so we wouldn't fund that.
I'm going to just kind of elaborate on that too, give an example. We had a project a couple rounds ago in the FQ Story neighborhood. It was a Tudor revival style home that had a diamond shaped asbestos tile roof. And the owner was like, man, what am I going to do? You know, asbestos tile's not made anymore, obviously. And so he looked at, you know, should I just do like a dimensional asphalt shingle? And then he finally came back and said, you know, I'm going to submit an application for a metal roof, but it's going to have the exact same appearance that original roof had. The diamond shaped tiles, he matched the dimensions, everything, matched the color. And in the end, it turned out really nice. So there are alternative materials that we will consider. Obviously, if you can, you know, keep with the original material, that's always best. But if you can't, for some reason it's not made anymore, like an asbestos tile, or there's some real practical reason why you can't use it, you know, we will look at acceptable alternatives, but I would definitely, you know, check with us before you submit an application just to make sure it's something we can support.
All right, we're getting down to the end. Lots of good questions. Okay, I would like to have the stucco on the house repaired and painted. If I would also like to have the perimeter wall done, would that quote need to be separated? Would I also be able to re-stucco the entire house and then paint? Okay, so I would say yes. I mean, you probably would want to have them separated if you're applying for you know, the building in and of itself. Generally, we're going to recommend that you are repairing existing stucco versus doing an entire restuccoing. But I guess if Kevin, if it's like a non-historic material, something that came on perhaps in the 70s that had some sort of texture where historically you didn't.
Yeah, that would make sense.
And you wanted to do the whole house.
I also heard perimeter wall in there. I from what I understood, everything that they're proposing sounds like it would be eligible, except perhaps the perimeter wall.
The perimeter wall, yeah. So generally, yes, it's repairing and painting. If there may be a unique situation where the entire house could be re-stuccoed. But again, always reach out, yeah, because it'll help us get a little more. Every house is different, particularly in historic districts, and help us to be able to give you a little guidance in advance of applying. And then I believe we're at the final question, which is when signing up as a vendor. Oh, I'm concerned the vendor, not my contractor. Let me see if I'm understanding that right. When signing up as a vendor, I'm concerned the vendor, not my contractor or person doing the work, question mark. So you'll want whoever is the vendor is going to be the person getting the check. So you'll want to, I'm assuming you're going to be footing the bill to the property owner. You'll want to be the one that gets reimbursed for the 50% of the work that you've paid for. So then you register as the vendor, so the city cuts you the reimbursement check. If I'm understanding that question correctly, but Kevin, go ahead and.
Yeah, there are some programs where the city will pay a contractor director, but this is not one of them. Under this program, our agreement is with you as the property owner. You're the one who's going to sign the grant agreement. You're the one who's going to sign the deed of conservation easement, and you're the one who's going to register as a vendor, and our check will go directly to you. And then you can kind of work it out with your contractor, how you want to pay them and who you want to hire, and that's entirely up to you. Obviously we'll want you to include that in the application. Let us know who you're proposing, but we don't necessarily dictate that. We work with you as the property owner.
All right, and that was it.
All right. Thank you, everybody. We appreciate you being here and asking good questions.
Oh, yes.
Laura?
So our email address, sorry, there was one quick one that came in. Can you repeat the email address? Yes, it is historic@Phoenix.gov, and Phoenix is spelled out. So yeah, look forward to your questions. Yeah, I'm happy to have this exciting year's new grant round.
All right. Thank you, everyone. We'll go ahead and end the workshop and have a great night.
Thank you.